Welcome, everyone. I'm Chari Elam with the Bee Supply Monthly Magazine, and I have a super popular guest with me today. I bet a few of you know who this is, Mr. Fred Dunn. Hi, Fred. How are you?
Hey, hey, I'm great. Well, I want to thank you for having me on and to be interviewed today. We did see each other at the conference, so I noticed that you were very busy the whole time, and thank goodness have my voice back finally so we can have this interview. And I'm sure you're down there nice, warm and toasty Southeast Texas while it's 12 degrees here. So
Well,
I'm
if
just happy to be anywhere indoors and warm right now. So,
right? Oh, me too.
yep,
If it
yep.
makes you feeling better, we were channeling your area of the Northeast over the last couple of days, and we were down to 17 the last 2 mornings. So you can
Yeah.
have it back. We're 41 this morning, but I still have my little handy dandy heater by me because that's still too cold.
Okay.
Well, Fred, tell everybody let's talk about who you are and how you got to be on YouTube for so long and what gave you the inspiration to do that.
Okay, well, as far as why I got on YouTube to begin with, is I just had a friend who did an advertisement and needed YouTube votes. So back in 2008, I jumped on YouTube just so I could vote on her, local competition. But originally, I got on YouTube to teach about chickens, so it wasn't even about honeybees. So I've always been interested in animals, life sciences, and stuff like that. I started keeping bees back in 2006, and doesn't matter where I've been in the world, and I've been all over the world. I'm always interested in local wildlife and getting a look at things up close. Sometimes it's not always smart to do. Back in 2006, I was interested in colony collapse disorder. So I got to meet and got to know pretty good one of our state bee inspectors who suggested that, hey, you can keep bees on your own in your own yard kind of thing. And since I had just sold off my Australian emus, I had a field handy. And because I was doing significant stages of growth and development of the Australian emu, of course, right here in the state of Pennsylvania, where they belong. And so the idea that you can keep bees on your own property and have access to them every single day of the week and every season throughout the year so that we can observe and study and learn was just too good to be true. So that began my keeping of bees in my own yard on my property. So my motivation for keeping honeybees had nothing to do with honey or production or pollination, just so I could keep them close enough so I could see what bees are really about. And here we are all these years later, and one thing led to another, and my videos were noticed. So the video sequences, YouTube improved through the years. I don't know how many people know what it's like to be a YouTuber back in 2008, but your video resolution was 720 by 480. You were kind of limited to a 10-minute or 15-minute video. So for those of you who are doing YouTube right now, the world is open because you can do a 12-hour video in 4K or better.
Wow.
So, I mean, everything's improved. So for those of us who struggled through it back in the day, now we reach a much larger audience. That's why I'm on YouTube to begin with now, is because I realize, well, for the first time in our lives, we're getting to know people and talking to people that we will never meet in person. And YouTube became a vehicle for giving a lesson that's going to last year after year, that's going to reach audiences anywhere where they've got the internet, which, of course, as we know now, is everywhere. And so you do a lesson once and it goes out there. That's the good and the bad. When you're early and new to beekeeping and you think you know things about bees, and of course you share about what you know, you can be questioned about a video back in 2010 this morning. And so you're held accountable for what you say, teach, and share. And that's so you want to have some fun. I highly recommend you find any YouTuber that you enjoy watching, go to their page, pick the oldest video, the first video they made. And first of all, it's a time warp. You're going to see what they look like younger, myself included. I didn't even have gray hair. And then you'll find out kind of what they were about. And then you see the growth and development of a channel and a person and the things that they are interested in also changed through the years. So now it's bees are the bulk of it, but I do a lot of other things as well. But that's why I keep bees. That's how I arrived at where I am now. Warner Brothers discovered me, the Discovery Channel, Animal Planet. They would not have known that I existed had it not been for a YouTube channel. So there you go.
That's pretty interesting. Do you ever said anything on those videos you wish you could just suck back up?
No, I think and I'm glad you said that because we own our mistakes. I think how we handle them is important. I'm also an oil painter. I painted a portrait of my grandfather back in the 80s, and it's a terrible portrait. It sucks. It's one of the worst oil painted portraits you will ever see. It hangs on the wall in my studio because it reminds me of how far I've come.
Right. But
So,
it may be worth $1 zillion.
oh yeah, it's worth at least the cost of the frame it's in for sure.
Invaluable to you, though.
But yeah, when we've said things in the past that you know are wrong, I think it's very important. And I do this. I go back in the video description, hoping that somebody will read that.
Mhm.
And I do my best to recover, particularly if it's going to lead someone down a bad path in beekeeping. The good news is I've never said anything so catastrophic that it would risk someone's life. So I
Good.
think that would be critical. And if you did do that in the past, if ever there was a candidate for making a video private, that would be the one.
That would
So
be the one.
yeah, hide that thing yesterday.
There has been a time or two that I'd go, well, that was pretty stupid what you said. It was years ago. Our first videos were about the stupidity in Varroa testing. Just the lack of knowledge, truly, the exposure. I think that's hilarious. If you can look back and laugh at it, then mission accomplished, right?
Yeah, if it's assuming
Definitely.
it's funny.
It is. It's always funny if if you can't laugh at yourself. And of course, we hope that those that are listening know that, maybe we don't know everything. And as instructors, free or otherwise, we're doing the best we can, learning, we're portraying what our experiences are. And we hope that maybe you can get a nugget out of it that, for whatever it's worth. I think that's what I'm going to name my future podcast, for whatever it's worth.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
Yeah.
there's a good phrase too that no one is smarter than everyone. And so thank
Uh,
goodness for YouTube and the ability that people have to comment down in the comment section, because if you want to really learn a topic, teach it. The questions and challenges that you get from your comment section are definitely going to help you improve your knowledge and push you in directions that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise investigated. So I think that's very valuable. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, we do that each month with a webinar. The Bee Supply does a monthly webinar that's free to its viewers that sign up, and we do a live Q&A, and I know you take questions as well. It really does. It really does build us. And I think that I don't know that everyone knows that when we are questioned, it incites us again to go in and look further and to make sure that we're answering it properly. We know all we need to know about that topic. So I love questions. Speaking of, I have one for you.
Okay.
Winter hives. I heard you say the other day, and it may have been your last video, which was just like a day or two ago. Leave it alone. Winter
Yeah.
hives. Leave it alone. Go
Yeah.
talk to us about that.
Well, we're already in the toughest time of year, so it's hard for beekeepers to sit on their hands because guess what? Beekeeping this time of year, if you're in the northeastern United States, which is where I'm located in the state of Pennsylvania, we just talked about the weather, which they say if a conversation is falling apart, it will go to the weather. So people
Note,
want to know what's going, what?
note to everybody listening.
Yeah. So people want to know what's going on with their bees. So this idea that you need to look in the hive and find out what the status of your queen is, or you know, it can be very detrimental to your bees. And it always I always get very concerned when people start off a question with, "I just looked in my hive, I just checked my brood," and I'm thinking, where are you, and what are the temperatures? Remember that your brood is 94 to 97 degrees Fahrenheit. This is very important.
Mhm.
And when you eliminate the heat that they're storing, and there's the mantle of the bees, and there are these endless discussions about the significance of the mantle, and those bees are insulation or they're a heat sink or whatever they are, what they are is designed to be sheltered from wind and weather until spring arrives. So you have to think in advance, what are you going to do with the knowledge? So often people open a hive and send a video and say, I found my bees and look, they're all dead up here in the corner. I guarantee you those bees were not dead. So this is the other part. There's something called a chill coma, by the way,
Your
that your
coma.
bees, we know they go into a state of torpor, but there are well-established temperature parameters for your bees. A chill coma locks your bees in place and they don't move. They appear dead. My grandson and I did a really fun experiment this year. He just turned 8. And he's one of those. He shows up here. If he came here today, he would want to go out. And if I said, yeah, let's open up the hives, let's check them all out, he would do it. So instead, let's look at bees on landing boards. Let's look at the bees that are in the snow. We've got that little shotgun pattern of bees in the snow. Let's collect them all up, put them on a dish, bring them inside and see what happens. Well, those bees are in a chill coma. So they're actually not dead. They will be if they stay in those temperatures for a continuing amount of time because they can only handle about 30 hours, 40 hours before they're really gone. And we put them on a plate, put them on the kitchen table. 100% of those bees reanimated and flew. Now, how long did they live? Only a few hours. So even with nectar and resources, sugar syrup, they die out anyway. So these are bees that were doing cleansing flights. They're trying to leave the hive because bees don't intentionally die inside the hive. Opening a hive and looking into that in the wintertime, you could have been the final nail in the coffin for that colony because you took them out of chill coma status and put them in frozen bee status. So there is a lower temperature threshold that ultimately kills the bees. So what they need is a warm back up within that 48 hours or whatever the parameters are so that they can once again activate their flight muscles, not fanning their wings, and start to warm again just enough. So there's this recovery period that you can take away from them by opening your hive. That's why we talk about progression through the years. I've learned through the years, insulated inner covers have changed my world up here.
Yeah.
And then having feed on top of the insulated inner cover, emergency resources. That's because I can access that to see, for those who have to see, what's the status of the feed, what's going on, how much fondant did they eat or whatever. You can see that, and we haven't removed that valuable heat capsule, and you close it right back up. You don't goof around and make a YouTube video and talk about it and pull them up to see what's under it. Don't do that. Right. Because they have to recover from every heat loss event inside the hive. It's remarkable what they can do if they're just sheltered from wind. The insulation factors get talked about a lot, and they should be. That insulated inner cover keeps that dew point from occurring over the top of your bees. It does occur on the side walls of the interior of your hive. Now, people are freaking out because it's, like I said, we dropped to the single digits up here. To me, that's a good thing. I want it that cold. Not only that, I want it to stay that cold because it's the flux of temperature range that causes these dynamics inside the hive and these condensation periods, these cycles. So when we get a warm up, if it went to 50 in 2 days, that would be a dramatic time for your bees. Condensation would form, frost would melt, and all of these things inside the hive. So those dynamics are what really can take your bees out. The longest, coldest winters we've had here have been my most successful winters, and that's because the tight cluster remains through winter. And when they come out, it's kind of a predictable, even flow of an expansion of the cluster, and then they're into production, and spring resources start to become available. So the weather dynamics, the weirdness that goes on is what really challenges our bees. And so yeah, the simple answer, don't open your hive. There's nothing you're going to do. When you think your bees are dead, maybe they weren't, but they are now, thanks to you. You know what I mean? You can't spare people's feelings.
No.
When they
Tough talk.
I think it's very important because, we're human. We are one of the few well, we're probably the only animals in existence that want to know things for the sake of knowing things. We just have to know.
Curiosity
And
killed the cat, right? That's what they say.
yep, so that's it.
Gosh, there's so much in there I want to pull out. One thing is you pop the propolis seal.
Well, yeah, they can't restore that. Yep.
Zero. It's rock hard. It is now just mortar sitting there that may or may not fit back like it was because you didn't situate. So then you've got gaping holes,
Oh
which
yeah, no,
us isn't a
absolutely not.
gaping hole, but to a bee that's this
Yeah.
big, that's a gaping hole and they can't do a darn thing about it.
Yeah. Well, it's an air outlet.
Yeah.
So sit in your car and crack a window a little bit, you know, and
At 5 degrees.
crack a little window on the other end of your car and see the air movement through it. And that's horizontal. But even the slightest crack causes air movement and will give you a chill, and then you'll see the condensation form around that point. So it's really, really valuable that you do not, as you said, don't break your propolis seals because they need warmth to do it. They need warmth to build beeswax. They're not putting this stuff back together this time of year. That's why insulated cover, feeder shim on top, that's your access point because you're breaking into nothing. So
Very good.
anyway,
Very, very good information. So the fluctuation of temperature, that is where I live, Southeast Texas, that's our downfall.
yeah,
Because, and in a lot of the temperate zones, I mean, you can go halfway up the nation and a lot of us fall into that category because they are consuming the resources that they so meticulously put back. So in your area, you're just saying, go in, cluster dormant, we're good. I'll insulate your lid, put you
yeah,
something resource emergency feed on top and we're
yeah,
doing good. But down in further south, we struggle with that because we are this roller coaster. So yesterday we were 17 and in 2 days we're going to be 79.
yeah. That's a problem.
It's a
But it's a
problem.
problem because, they're going to fly out and what resources do they have in your environment there? I don't even know.
Big old fat goose egg.
Right. So they're burning calories,
Yeah,
they're scouting out, and they're consuming the resources left in your hive.
yeah,
So that's when they actually spread out and use those valuable capped honey resources that in my neck of the woods, they don't even touch.
right.
That's the most that's the most frustrating thing for new beekeepers here is their cluster moves up through the center 3 or 4 frames. And in frame 1 and 2 or 8 and 9, they have capped honey that they didn't touch, but they're up at the top starving. It's very frustrating
Right
because the
here.
weather doesn't allow them to spread out. But if they had a weather dynamic like you have,
Yeah.
they'll spread out, but they'll use up all their resources. And then you can end up with a starving colony in spring that has a bunch of brood and no resources coming in. That is a very challenging environment for your bees.
It
Yeah.
really is, and challenging for a writer to instruct beekeepers on what to do for the month of February and March. And that is a good note to bring up to the new beekeepers watching this, is that what works for Fred won't work for Chari, but it may work for someone in between that kind of experiences the both ends of it, but maybe the top end, not so much the bottom end.
Right.
Super important for me to watch my resources as winter goes in, as we progress through winter. Because of that, my bees, they suck it up. They're taking it. We had a event we called Snowmageddon, and I'm sure that those of you that live in the north probably laugh at us, and we deserve it. We truly deserve it. As we were like 7 days below freezing, 9 degrees, I think, was our high for like 7 days. And
Yeah.
in Texas, we just pretty much, you might as well just put a nail on our front door because we're not going out.
Yeah.
We shut down.
Yeah.
But we learned a lot. We started putting our resources closer to that cluster when we go into extreme cold seasons. So in your area, they do eat that resource right next to the cluster, correct?
Yeah, absolutely, because they have to warm it. And keep in mind, your bees can't even chew the caps off of the beeswax that's in your stored honeycomb unless it's warmed first. And the cluster forming over that capped the honey that's capped They warm it enough that now they can tear off those caps and get the resources in the cells. On that outer perimeter, if you had right now inside the hive, when it's, 9 degrees outside, it's probably 25 degrees farthest from the cluster on the sidewalls inside the hive. That's too cold for a bee to reach it and to access it. So this is why the cluster, like a softball or whatever, moves through the hive together, but they get locked in when they start brooding up. That's when you need the most bees. That's when you start, when I do thermal scans of the hives, if I see the cluster kind of break apart, and there's a warm spot up here and a warm spot down here, I know they've established brood down here. And this is where the numbers of bees are so critical. If you've got a really tiny cluster the size of your fist, there aren't enough bees to do the warming, the resource management, the brooding up, and taking care of your queen and everything else. So a large number of bees going into the fall is really critical. And I'm sure it's the same down there too, because it doesn't take a lot for them to do that. So these thermal scans are very informative. What's directly above them gets passive warmth, so they can start to move and get those resources. But remember that unless they're brooding up, there's always some winter brood. Unless they're adding new bees, just for attrition alone, they won't be able to manage the space and the resources. And that leads me to the other part of it. People think if you're a new beekeeper that leaving more resources on is better, a bigger hive, 2 supers, 3 supers going into winter. It is not. Sizing your hive to the colony of bees that are occupying it is very important, because even if the cluster is down low because they have the resources there, if you've got a couple of boxes above them, because I used to do it. You mentioned, do we wish we could take back videos we did back in the day? Sure, because I had what I called super colonies, triple deeps. This is a monster. I'm going to make so many hives out of this, so many colonies in the spring. But what was happening was had the most moisture in it of any of my hives, because condensation was forming on the honeycomb, because it was out of reach of the bees, because they were down below. They never used all of their resources. So year after year, because I was super smart, year after year, that size colony killed the bees that occupied it with moisture. And because I didn't know what I know now, which is insulate the inner cover. You buy a bee kit, you assume that the bee kit is designed to keep your bees alive. You've got boxes, an inner cover, an outer cover. There's no insulation there, and there's a built-in vent in your inner cover.
Right.
It's like it's set up for that, no matter where you live. And as you mentioned, beekeeping's local. So you need to learn what works where you live year after year after year. This is why mentors are so valuable. They've done it year after year after year. Talk to the people that are not having at the bee meeting a statement that they've lost most of their bees. That's not the person you talk to. You talk to the person whose bees are making it, and you try to get them, you have to pry information out of them, right? These are people that don't share their secrets. I come from a small town, and I wanted to learn from a mentor. There's a big shot beekeeper who I will not name, who he would be at the hardware store, and I'd walk into the hardware store, and the owner would look at me and go, "Fred, he's over there." And he sold all his honey in the hardware store, shelves full of it. I said, "Oh, he's over there." I said, so I had to plan my bullet points. I needed to ask questions. He would see me and head out the door. I said, "I just have one question," and out the door. And I couldn't get any information. He would give you an answer, but it would be a single phrase as he gets in his truck and leaves. He was not interested in sharing information about how he keeps bees, what he does. He thought of anyone else as potential competition.
Oh, you were
So
going to be
here's
one in the hardware store taking his honey shelf.
Well, that's just it. He sold raw honey. Now, because we're talking 2004, 2005. I was thinking about keeping bees. I didn't have bees, but I was trying to find out who keeps bees. I wanted to know about it. And I wanted to talk to them. And then this is a community of just over 400 people. I mean, you can't hide for very long. And then our church had a men's breakfast, and I find out he's in our men's breakfast. He's way over there. And all I wanted to do is talk to him. But even there, he was like, he wouldn't talk.
Well, There are good mentors out there that'll talk your head off, but
Thank goodness there are. They're
thank
not
goodness.
always the ones we want to learn from, though.
No, we talked about that. We had a conference after the conference in Louisville, and we talked about that. It's probably not a good idea to learn from the beekeeper that you can tell is a procrastinator. Their bee yard's full of old worn out equipment where they lost a hive and let it go to small hive to wax moths. That may not be your best mentor. Just maybe. Maybe.
Well, and find someone that, a mentor, that's a pretty personal thing. So it needs to be somebody that you're compatible with personality wise. Someone that kind of keeps bees in a way that you hope to keep bees yourself, because there are a lot of different reasons for keeping honeybees. Maybe honey is a product you want to produce. So you glom on to the people that are big honey producers or something. Some people specialize in comb honey. You want to glom onto that person, but we all have so much time available, and that's it. So at the very moment that everybody wants to know something becomes the busiest time of beekeeping. So even your mentors have their own bees to care for.
Right.
So it's really hard to get people to give up their time. And so I don't mentor more than 10 people. You just can't help more than that. Otherwise, you're going to be ignoring people, and it snowballs. Everything happens immediately. So
how do you answer all the questions that come in?
I don't answer all the questions that come in. So for my Friday Q&As,
Yeah.
I filter through it because I try to find the questions that I feel would be pertinent to the wider audience. Most of my beekeepers are backyarders. They're not commercial people.
Right.
I try to find information that's appropriate for what's going on in the coming weeks, like now. And so when someone asks something very technical, very involved honeybee biology question, that's something that gets sidelined from me. Unless it's so interesting that it's fun to know.
Right.
It's at the end, I do a fluff bit at the end where I just talk about whatever I want to talk about.
Right.
But when I realize that the question is based on something that a lot of people are going to be facing right now in the coming weeks, I'm definitely going to put that in, even if it's a repeat. Because there are a lot of people that are just now watching. And so I think those are very important. That's how I decide. I spend 3 hours conservatively every single day answering questions and printing out those that I think would be suitable for Friday. So it's not that I don't respond, it's that they're not included in my Q&A, or the Q&A would be 3 hours. And then what good is that? Particularly when I realized that the question deals with something like they wrote me at 10 o'clock last night, and this is something they need an answer to right now. I'm not going to make them wait until Friday to have me give a long explanation about it for the general audience. Instead, I'm going to respond to them personally right away. Please don't do what you're thinking about doing. It's going to be detrimental.
Help yourself.
No, so that's a responsibility you take. There is a responsibility if you put yourself in the public forum and present yourself as a source of information, you agree to provide answers to people or find answers for them from viable sources. Because we all know there's so much information out there that just absolutely can't be true. So credibility is very important, timely information that is well reasoned and hopefully grounded in science and bee biology. People think that things are causing benefits to the bees without any justification for it. But so from the presenter perspective, everyone just wants to be heard. So I do my best to respond to everyone. The worst thing you can do is somebody asks a question and you just dismiss it and give them no response. That's something that's on my mind all the time because I realize that it's meaningful to them. I can't just say, yeah, well, I did a video about that 15 years ago. Go dig it up.
Yeah.
That doesn't help them. I wish they would. I wish they would go to the channel and type in the little search bar, whatever their issue is, and
find it.
chances are I've done a video about it. But the time it takes me to say that to them, I could have answered their question.
Sure.
So I just
do that too.
do that. Yeah.
I know credibility, you said that word, I was like, boy, you know, that's really changed because when we first, we're a dozen years into it. And I remember very well telling beekeepers 12 years ago in the instruction end of it, that anybody can make a YouTube video. And I wasn't referring to you. I was referring to anybody that doesn't have experience.
Right.
So look into, you know, there's a plethora of YouTube videos out there.
Yep.
Make sure that who you are listening to has some credibility, because anybody can make a YouTube video.
Sure.
I've
Yeah.
dug into some more years ago. It seems to, people seem to be more credible now than they were then. I don't know, maybe I'm just looking in better places, but I would look into this guy that had a ton of videos, and I realized that he just started beekeeping last year. Not that he couldn't learn a lot, but still. You said bee biology, my favorite topic. I love it. It is what our aha moment, you know, the light bulb over the head was, most people's is 3 years into it. Do you think 3 years to the aha moment of, I think I've got this. I understand what the biology means, and I understand this. I understand how the workings, how important that is. But bee biology is where we failed in the very beginning. We killed our first hive, and then I went back and went, you know what? I think we skimmed over that biology part because we were thinking it was something that wasn't important. It was like in school. You believe that too, right? Bee biology, the workings, the life cycle, what each bee is supposed to be doing, how important that is. All times of year, but almost more importantly, going into winter and coming out of winter. The sandwich of winter.
Yeah, if you don't understand the biology of the animal that you're keeping, you will not understand the natural cycles that it goes through season after season, year after year. And it's something I realize when I give a presentation, I bridge profound science and practical backyard keeping intentionally. I avoid all of the deep entomological terms because those are alienating to people. Yet, we still have to share about and teach about the biology of the honeybee, why it does what it does, how it's reproduced, what their intention is as an organism. So their intention as an organism is to reproduce. Every living thing out there is designed for reproduction and the continuation of the species. So understanding all you can about that, that's the beauty of beekeeping, by the way. I'm also a poultry technician, so I feel like I learned everything I needed to know about chickens in 10 years. And chickens are easy. Honeybees surprise us still. That's the beauty of the honeybee. We still don't have answers for everything a bee does. And but you can get the basics. You mentioned 3 years. 3 years is the breaking point. Either people realize they have no idea what they're doing and they quit, or they start to realize, wow, I'm starting to figure this out. And then they go into their 4th, 5th, and 6th year.
Right.
And once they've done that, because here's the thing, there are many new beekeepers that are very frustrated. They thought they were doing the right thing, and then to be devastated with 100% loss of their bees in spring, which is when it most frequently happens, and not understanding cause and effect. See, that's the problem. Today, we're used to answers. And my bees are doing this. Why? And those are questions that beekeepers get if you are a source of information. Well, I need way more information than that. And that's the problem. These are all contributing factors to why your bees succeed or fail. And it can, more times than not, come right down to the beekeeper and the way you're managing the bees. We're in a climate of extremes right now. So in other words, some people think it's the type of the hive that you put them in that is the answer. It's the type of comb that you put them on that is the answer. It's the amount of feed that you give them and what it's composed of that is the answer. These are all many pieces to a tiny puzzle. And if you understood bees, their biology, and what they need to survive and thrive, the box that you put them in becomes secondary. So it is very interesting. I think people, they feel like you could just ask a question, the answer should exist. And the thing is, a lot of us have questions, and we're still trying to figure it out because the playing field is changing. Where you have
Evolving.
environmental, pardon?
It's evolving.
It is, well, and devolving. Like if we talk about our agricultural practices, we're taking hits that are new every single year, as are the bees, and these are sublethal impacts on your bees. Now it becomes so complicated, some people throw up their hands and say, why even bother keeping bees?
So true. You said about hive box, hive style, the
Yeah,
container our bees live in. I'm
yeah.
going to use that as a segue because I know that you are a proponent of not only the Apimaye, I say it differently than you.
That's fine.
I know, I call it Apimaye, whether that's right or wrong.
Everybody knows what it is.
Everybody knows what it is. It's a
Yeah.
wonderful hive system. We carry it ourselves. And you can have a division board and you can section it off. Well, years ago, we had the joy of meeting Mike Palmer.
Mm-hmm.
You know him out of Vermont, or you know
Oh
of him.
yeah, Michael Palmer. He was part of a New Earth or Back to Earther movement. My entire family comes from Vermont, so we
Oh,
know that part of St. Albans, Vermont, is where he was. That's where all the hippies were concentrated. They all ran away from the University of Vermont and decided to dismantle old barns and build their new houses and live free and easy off the land. And yeah, I know all about Mike Palmer.
yeah, he looks like he could have been one of those, doesn't
He
he?
was, he was
Was he?
back
Was
to
he really?
earther.
I did not
Oh,
know that.
absolutely. Yeah, he was. He makes no bones about it. He still has his ponytail that he's had since he was
He
17.
does. He does.
Yep.
Well, in that meeting, we were just enthralled with his double nuke system, the
Yep.
double nuke system. And it all, to me, it comes back as that, but I had a question. I'm going to just propose a question to you because in that system, it's 4/4. So those that aren't familiar with that, that's basically keeping your bees in a nuke size box. Apimaye does it in a double, which the Palmer double nuke is also a double. The theory is that the two colonies actually feed off of that warmth that they share in the middle, and they will congregate and cluster to the middle, although they're two separate colonies. Well, you mentioned that in doing that, it forces them to grow faster than in installing, let's say we install a nuke into a 10 frame box, but you install it into the double nuke, for lack of a better word, and that it forces them to grow vertical faster. And then you would take that 5/5, which is what yours is, and you would install that into a 10 frame. So 10 and 5 to make your 10. I think I know, because I know how a colony works, but please explain that process. So I can't just go like this. I need to think it through of how I place my brood and the resources, correct? Talk us through that.
Right. Well, I call those resource nukes, but and the reason we call them resource nukes is because those are originally I used to just put late season swarms in those boxes and write them off. And in my case, we're talking about the 5 frame nukes. They're all deeps, and I do 5/5/5. So they're actually triples. So we're talking about 15 deep frames. But in the spring or whenever you have we all find those small swarms that seem like a write-off. A lot of beekeepers wouldn't even hive them. You put them right in that 5 frame nuke and let them start to build out. When they have 4 out of 5 frames, we put another layer on top. Mike Palmer talks about it. Keep in mind his climate is, Northwest Vermont. He's near the Canadian border. When he puts 2 sets of them together, whatever warm wall there is, that's where they're going to concentrate their brood. So that's where that common wall between the two colonies is for them. And I don't do that actually. So I don't do the double. All of my nuke hives that are lined up, there's an airspace between them. So I don't insulate them at all. So they concentrate their brood in that second or third frame out of the 5. And then it's a warm column that rises. And the thing is, once they're in the productive year, because we mentioned this a little earlier, that they need warmth to build, to seal with propolis. They need warmth. And when they're working beeswax, they also need that to be warm. And the target zone is in the 80s, right?
Right.
So if we have this warm column up through the middle, and we've already started our nuke, let's say this spring shows up, you collected a swarm, you put them in a 5-frame nuke box. Apimaye is a really good, that 7-frame nuke that they have
Yeah.
is perfect for this.
Yeah.
You start them in that bottom box, and as they build it out, you have to get that second box going while they're producing comb. We don't want to ever let them stop. Something happens. When they stop production, I don't know if the contractors leave, I don't know what happens, but while they're building comb, you have to keep them building comb.
Good.
So that second box goes on, and this warm column keeps the warmth there, and we're talking spring now, and they continue to build it. So this resource hive is used not just for extra brood and extra queen if I need one, they're comb builders. So in
Mhm.
that top box, by the time you get to the third box, they're drawing out brand new comb that later you can pull. So you start checkerboarding it out.
Right.
And then you take that good comb, and I don't care if you put it in storage, I don't care if you have it as a resource off to the side for later in the year, or if you've got another colony that you're trying to bolster, then you just put that comb in there. And then you replace it with some started comb or some foundation that's heavy waxed or something like that. This year it was great for cut comb also, because that warmth was retained and they would make comb honey. So it's also because we're looking at basically a single 10-frame brood box. That's kind of how you look at it. The bottom two boxes, that's 10 frames combined.
Right.
They build much faster in the 5/5 than they do in the 5 next to 5. Even if it's an insulated hive, these vertical columns build faster. So, and if we think about, the trees and things like that that bees live in, that column would be vertical and narrow. It wouldn't be
Right.
like the 10-frame brood box that we use so much. But as you also described, if I decided, "Oh, I want to hive those and make a full size, hive out of it, I would pull all of those frames and I would keep the brood in the center and I would work my way out. So any frames above that had brood would be adjacent to brood as I transfer to the 8 or 10 frame deep nuke, not nuke, but deep brood box. So then, now you've got a full size hive for those that want that. They were supposed to be temporary, and now I have a whole bunch of nukes out there
Yeah.
because they're so successful, and it boggles the mind a little bit how they can manage such a small space while being ignored. I don't feed them, but I do late season inspections, and that top box is wall-to-wall honey.
Huh.
So when I'm taking honey off here in the state of Pennsylvania, I don't draw anything after mid-September. So then they have the last couple of weeks of September and the rest of October. That is goldenrod, that is asters, and lately it's hyssop. And so now they can fortify themselves for the coming
Mhm.
winter, which is
Yeah.
what they've been trying to do all year long. And we just work against them because we just steal their stuff.
Yeah. Kept taking it
And
when we.
yeah, and I keep the colonies smaller because if they're brooding up, if I open that thing up and the bottom two boxes are all brood,
Oh,
sorry, I start pulling brood and I just take it away and I put it in another hive.
mhm.
And that's how I try to keep them under control because otherwise they're a swarm machine.
Yeah.
They're just going to generate swarm after swarm after swarm, like my observation hives do.
Yes.
But so I do differ from Mike Palmer in that regard. The good news is, we've all faced that queenless colony at the end of the year.
Mhm.
So if you've got a really good hive otherwise, and these nucleus resource hives have a queen, we can just combine them. So we just pull all
Awesome.
their resources and
Yes.
transfer them all because it's getting too cold. They won't care anyway.
Mhm.
You will leave that hive there, but it's empty. And some of the foragers are going to come back to it because it's ingrained and it's
Mhm.
ingrained in their mind that this is where they live and they're just going to go back. But the queen and everything else can be transferred. And she's not been out since she did her mating flight. So
Right.
now they'll stay and they'll be anchored and then they're good to go. So they're just resources. And it seems like the more you ignore them, the better they do. But this narrow, tall column of bees in the northeastern part of the United States is performing extremely well.
It does here too. I will
Yeah.
say it does here too.
Yeah.
We use those as resource colonies as well, and we've run a bunch of them, and they are a cover yourself coming out of
Yeah.
winter, because there's losses. Typically, you've got some losses. The more bees you've got, the more the loss, right?
Sure. Yeah.
And that is your resource to come right out until queens are available even. But gosh, my husband in our area, because we don't winter, we just started winter the other day. We can have that being a brood machine almost nonstop.
Yep.
10 months for sure out of 12. So anybody
Wow.
out there, yeah,
Yeah.
anyone out there that is wanting to have an insurance policy, because that's really what it is. These resource colonies, call it whatever you want to,
Yeah. You'll never buy bees.
you'll never buy bees.
Right.
Truly never buy bees. And they're super fun. Actually, one of the taglines we used to put with that is for the person who wants to play with their bees all the time. And we keep, slapping your hand going, no, every 2 weeks. You can only go in and check every 2 weeks. The more you mess with them, you're going to cause absconding and cause issues. This is the hive that you want to have so that you can go in and open it up and I can do this and put it over here and rob Peter to pay Paul or whatever.
Right. Yeah.
It's just a super fun way of beekeeping. I've written a couple of articles on that.
Yeah.
What else? Build up early. It's the last topic I'm gonna put you through. Actually, now I got two, but I'll do it really quickly. Build up too early. There is that threat, especially in our area. Our area starts seeing mid-February, we're gonna see ash, maybe a maple that starts to bud. So we'll have a pollen source come that, but we are weeks and weeks from any nectar source flow, right?
Right. Mhm.
So thankfully, nature works kind of in their favor. We do have to feed, but in your experience, the problems of building up too early, feeding pollen subs too early, dry pollen particularly too
Mhm.
early for those more temperate zones. Tell me about that.
Well, once again, you have to consider why I keep the bees. So I'm not trying to brood them up. I do look at colony strength activity when we get those cleansing flight days. We do landing board observations and see where the cluster is formed and look at their behavior. We look for early pollen here at Salix discolor, which is the pussy willow plants. We have a lot of wetlands here. We have really cool skunk cabbage in early spring that will actually melt its way through ice and snow. It's a warm-blooded plant.
Huh.
And so they get pollen from that. I have done dry pollen sub open feeding, and the only reason I did it is because these are backyard tests to prove what the bees are attracted to. So AP23, Mega Bee, those were the top two ranked pollen subs. I don't feed any pollen subs or any protein patties or anything like that inside my hives ever. They're only available as foragers find them. And then we look to see what the activity is on those dry pollen subs. Now, here's the thing. We only get a couple of weeks of that here before the real resources are actually kicking in and the bees are finding it. And keep in mind, there's primacy when it comes to your foragers. So whatever they find first, they'll go to before they go out and do a wider search.
Correct.
So an ultra bee from Man Lake was a favorite for the bees. And and there's a lot of speculation about what's in it. It attracts the bees. There's a stronger smell. But my whole point was, even if it's nutritionally inferior to AP23 or Mega Bee or global patties, if it's inferior, but they're taking more of it, they're actually probably boosting your colony more. And across the board, the prices were about the same. But AP23 was the least favorite. In other words, I had to do a switcheroo on them and get them lured over there with the Ultra Bee and the other stuff. And then once the foragers were hitting that, then I would leave only AP23 and I put it in milk cartons so they can get their footing and stuff. There are a lot of great backyard tests to do, but when we consider that there are 36 colonies of bees coming to this pollen sub, I don't believe it's a significant impact on them at all. That it's a great test to see what it does demonstrate preference. And but as far as getting a significant boost in brood to where you would actually notice the difference, because remember, 2 weeks in, they're getting other pollen resources,
Right.
and that's going to be a little better. And then of course dandelions kick in, and then it's all over. By the time dandelions kick in, you don't have a minute. Every time you go outside, there's a swarm somewhere. There's a colony that you did not expand quick enough, and everybody's doing the same thing by then.
Right.
So as far as open feeding, I think is a great idea. I do it because it gives your foragers something to do.
Mhm.
If they're not finding resources in the environment, guess where they're going to find them? In other bee colonies. If they find a hive that's not well defended, or heaven forbid is not queen right in spring, they're going to rob it like crazy. And that's where people think, oh, they absconded. No, they got robbed out. They had nothing left, and they all moved to their neighbors.
Yeah.
More and more that's happening. And so providing resources out in the environment that let your bees find a resource on their own in spring is a good benefit. Now, keep in mind, if you're commercial, like some of the numbers you described to me earlier on, where people have thousands of beehives and things like that, the things that I do would be 100% insignificant. We would look only at environmental resources, and I would be all over beescape.org to find out if the environment that you're keeping your bees in is even going to provide for them, and if there are dearth periods that you can expect to be reflected in the brood numbers in your own hive and apiary. So learning year after year what goes on with the cycle of your bees. So for me, I just watch them, see what they're doing, and if it happens that we get a day in the 60s or something like that, I will put out sugar syrup for them. Now here's the problem, and this I'm going to put myself on report for this. If you're putting out sugar syrup for your bees, that's a feel-good thing to do, right? We like to see them go. And remember what we talked about, chill coma.
Yeah.
Bees can fly out and get into a cold syrup and just park themselves right next to it. They can't even fly back. So we warm our syrup to over 70 degrees Fahrenheit before we put it out. Very impractical if you're a commercial beekeeper. You're not going to do that.
Right.
But for the backyard beekeeper, it's a feel-good moment. You want to see your bees feed and come back. But the strongest colonies are the ones going out and getting that. The ones that need it don't have the surplus workers to send them out. So you have to find your colonies that are struggling. And then we get into, see how this works, the Darwinian discussion. People will get angry that you're perpetuating weaker bees that aren't making it in your
Yeah.
environment. And then, but you're a backyard beekeeper and you want to see if this will work. And that leads me to fondant. So putting fondant on those colonies resuscitated spring colonies that were coming out small that otherwise would have 100% perished. So having a little pack of fondant on there, and now they have the big packs that are 5 pounds each or whatever. I'm not a chef. I don't make fondant in my kitchen. A lot of people have fondant recipes. They make their own. It's convenient for me just to buy it, put it on, and it's harvested seaweed extract from, Ireland. So you get the sense that it must be wholesome if they're harvesting it by hand. And it's seaweed after all, which your honeybees would all want to go to
Right.
in the
Right.
middle of Pennsylvania. So, but the colonies consume it and they survive when they can't afford to send foragers out because it's not warm enough yet. So it's kind of the middle ground. I think feeding and open feeding and things like that is a feel good moment for us, but the strongest colonies are the ones benefiting from that, and they didn't even need it. So
True. So true.
yeah.
You're feeding the neighborhood. I mean, if you want to just do that, that's fine.
Oh, don't even get me started. I put dried powdered sugar on I was open feeding. In fact, I was cycling back covered old frames of honey, right, that had been frozen. And I just wanted to get rid of it because all the colonies were doing well. None of them needed it. So I decided to see how long it takes a bunch of bees to consume or rob out, open honey resources. So I left them exposed. And there were so many bees on it, I put dry powdered confectioner's sugar on them because I wanted to see what direction they were going. They were all heading northeast of me. So I was feeding my neighbor's bees. So I stopped. I just stopped. Because first of all, here's what's wrong with that on many fronts. One, you're wasting your resources. Number two, you're feeding someone sugar or you're giving them a resource that they did not tell you they wanted their bees to have. So that's the other, there's the ethics of it. Some people just want their bees to source everything from plants And if you're going to open feed sugar syrup and it's going to your neighbor's bees, they didn't get a choice in it. And then again, there are the freeloaders that are hoping that you're going to open feed with syrup, and they'll send all their bees your way. In fact, they'll take a bucket of them down your way and dump them on your hive just so they know, so they can tell the others where it's at.
I'm wishing somebody would feed nearby. Save me a little
Well,
bit of money and feed.
yeah. So once again, it's like bird feeders. It's a feel good moment. You like to see your
Yeah.
bees getting resources and flying, and it breaks up your spring, and just it's fun to do.
Well, the last thing I'll drag us through on is I love that you do your own beekeeper studies and you encourage us to do them. I don't think that people give themselves enough credit for that, but we have that. We have that. If you can buy the product,
Yep.
pick a hive or two that you want to try it on and hold it from another and get your own assessment.
Yep.
You love that, right?
I do. Yeah. The scientific process is, who's in my mind when I do these backyard tests and I don't get feedback from them, but there's a lot of homeschool kids. And I'm
Yeah.
always thinking in my head, oh, they have a science unit. Let's teach them to look at things from a scientific perspective. We have a question. How could we answer it? Could we put together a backyard experiment that would give us that answer? So, and it applies this process of having a control or, having a hive that does
Yes.
not get this benefit and others that do. And in the absence of having hundreds of hives, what you have is many seasons. So any test requires repeatability. So, we satisfied, I only have 30 plus colonies. Somebody else may have 500 at their disposal. If you're Bob Binney, you can divide a bee yard 50-50 and do one thing to half of them and not do it to the other half. Fantastic analytical method. If you're a backyard beekeeper, what you can do is season after season, year after year, keep records and make incremental changes until you see consistent, lasting benefits to what you're doing. And that process is very important to teach to our kids. I'm thrilled. I have 3 grandsons. One of them, declares himself a certified, official amateur beekeeper, whatever he wants to call himself. Um, he wore a bee suit for Halloween and had a label on it, but I'm a real beekeeper.
Oh, bless
In other
his.
words, and he's full of knowledge and he just wants to do it. So I teach him to look at everything as a potential scientific experiment to prove out what we think is happening. Right down to when he got stung by a bee, he got stung on the chest and he ran away and he said, I got stung, it's biting me, blah, blah, blah. He's actually very controlled for a kid that is being stung. And then I said, now what happens? Don't bees die when they get stung? What could we find out? He goes, yeah, we can find out how long it lives after it lost its stinger. So we turn this immediately into, he's still got tears on his cheeks, we turn this into, let's find out how long this bee lives. And he gets 55 minutes, so he writes it down.
Wow.
Now, does that answer, would every bee be the same? I don't know. So the next time one stings us, we'll do the same thing. We'll find out this is a consistent thing. So we really taught him a scientific process. We have a thought about what's happening, and now we can get some facts. So, and that's the beauty of it. Sharing your experiments on YouTube. Once again, why have YouTube? Because in the back of my mind, some of these homeschool kids are going to do the same thing. Let's see if Fred's test holds true where we live. What could we learn? What kind of water do bees like? Do bees like salt in their water? How much salt? How many salt sources? Is this stuff really a stimulant for bees to drink more syrup? So we talk about the different essential oils that people sell and add. And then you find out at the end that the essential oils were not necessary, that the sugar syrup by itself was preferred by bees 100% of the time. So, but it teaches kids to think like that.
Yeah.
And this will cut through all of the opinion-based and the anecdotal information. And so question everything and see if what they're saying could be true. Is there a way that we can test to see if what they're telling us is true actually is true? So
That. What a great way to end this talk. I love
what's
that.
that?
I said, what a great way to end this talk. I love that.
Yeah. So that's the end. Oh,
Yeah,
that's sad.
darn. Well,
Okay.
we've about been an hour.
But I did notice the plant behind you perked up a little bit, so it
Did
was
it? Oh,
listening.
it did.
Yeah, I think it's happier.
I
Yeah,
think it
definitely.
is. It
Okay.
feels like it has been educated.
Yeah, plants are paying attention.
They are.
They know
Fred, I
stuff.
really appreciate you joining me and it's been a great visit. I love this chat and I know everyone that clicks on that, they'll feel the same way. So let's try to do this again, maybe in another 7, 8, 9, 10 months.
Absolutely. Thank you so much for having me on. It was a pure pleasure, and it was nice to see you at the conference and see all the great information that you were sharing there with your interviews and Q&A periods. So thanks
Thanks.
a lot.
We'll
Absolutely.
be repeating that again in 2025, if you can believe we'll say that word.
All right. I might
Awesome.
even go.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thanks, Fred. We'll
Yep,
talk
absolutely.
soon. Have a good one.
Okay. All right.